All right, fact check this podcast. And today, I'm going to do a couple articles. Neither of them are particularly long, but I posted a thing about the first one a couple weeks ago. And I've been meaning to get around to it, but again, it's not particularly long, and it didn't seem like enough to do just an episode on just that. And then I came across this other one. There's actually a third one, but I don't like it for this, and it's longer, so I might do that entirely separately. But anyway, back to me reading articles and talking about stuff. These two are very interesting, and like I said, I posted a little thing about one of them a couple weeks ago. The first one, it is from Mother Jones, and it's and it falls under the category extremism. The fact that Mother Jones has an entire category on their site dedicated to extremism is pretty fucking nuts. Just to be totally honest, like Mother Jones dedicates a portion of their site to extremism, and let me switch over to that just so you can get an idea of what Mother Jones authors are writing about for extremism. Tens of thousands of people gathered in D.C. to worship Jesus. The Christian nationalists plan to take over America. MAGA church plans to raffle a Trump AR-15 at a Second Amendment rally. Trump, and every single pop-up advertisement on this site is some like lefty bullshit. It's amazing. Trump amplifies his dangerous hate speech against migrants. Evangelicals have a plan to flip 19 key counties. This is extremism on Mother Jones. I personally love Mother Jones. I love reading articles from Mother Jones. And the same for the second article that we'll be doing, which is from Vanity Fair. I love to read stuff from Mother Jones and Vanity Fair. Why? Why would I like to read that? I mean, we just went through the headlines from extremism. Why would I like to read that kind of insane bullshit? Because it is insane bullshit. You get to really dig in and take a look into the minds of the most far leftists out there. The people who are writing for Mother Jones and Vanity Fair are completely detached from reality. The only thing that lives in their brain is woke propagandist bullshit and nonsense. So getting to take a look into the brain of these people through the stuff that they write is incredible. It's fascinating. I highly recommend it. The Atlantic is another one that I really enjoy reading the stuff from the Atlantic because it is about as insane as you can get. The Atlantic has a subscription fee, and so I don't like reading into the brain of insane people that much. So I did previously have a last year whenever I was doing like daily content and stuff. I had a subscription to the Atlantic and would regularly look at articles because they are so insane and they are so detached from like reality. So let's dive in. And I think what's really, really crazy about Vanity Fair and Mother Jones is most of the authors are female, and we won't go any further into it other than just to say that. So let's take a look at this first article, though. To understand J.D. Vance, you need to meet the Theobros. These extremely online young Christian men want to end the 19th Amendment, restore public flogging, and make America white again. Hell to the yes. All 3 points sound amazing. I never thought myself a Theobro, whatever the hell that is, but to hear her put it that way, I am fully on board. So nonetheless, let's take a look. On July 15th, when former President Donald Trump first appeared at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, he brought along 2 new accessories. One was a large bandage covering his ear, which had been nicked by a would-be assassin's bullet. The other was Ohio's first-term senator and hillbilly elegy author, J.D. Vance, who was about to debut as the GOP vice presidential hopeful. 2 days later, after paying tribute to his wife, Usha, the children of immigrants from India, and their 3 biracial kids, Vance portrayed a vision of America that resonated deeply with Trump voters. America is not just an idea, he said solemnly. It is a group of people with a shared history and a common future. It is, in short, a nation. To many viewers at home, this seemed like the stuff of a boilerplate patriotic stump speech, but the words shared history lit up a far-right evangelical corner of social media. America is a particular place with a particular people, Joel Webbin, a Texas pastor and podcaster, wrote on X. This is one of the most important political questions facing America right now, posted former Trump administration official William Wolf. Answer it wrong, and we will go the way of Europe, where the native-born populations are being utterly displaced by third-world immigrants and Muslims. Answer it right, and we can renew America once more. Vance was embracing one of their most cherished beliefs. America should belong to Christians, and more specifically, white ones. The American nation is an actual historical people, says Stephen Wolfe, no relation to William. I don't know who William is anyway. The author of the 2022 book, The Case for Christian Nationalism. Not just a hodgepodge of various ethnicities, but actually a place of settlement and rootedness. For this group of evangelical leaders, Vance, a 40-year-old former Marine who waxes rapturous about masculinity and women's revered roles as mothers, was the perfect tribune to spread their gospel of patriarchal Christian nationalism. For years, graying, khaki-clad evangelists have faithfully made the rounds at conservative events. However, as Wolf, a 41-year-old Princeton postdoc, writes in his book, these men in wrinkled, short-sleeved golf shirts, sitting plump in their seats, are yesterday's Christians. Among younger activists, they inspire the rolling of eyes. They are the embodiment of an ineffective boomer approach to taking over the United States for Jesus. As I've written multiple times in my Substack, it's true. They are the embodiment of an ineffective boomer approach to taking over the United States for Jesus, because everything has become and boiled down to, oh, Jesus loves you, just do whatever you want, it'll be fine. And that's not the gospel. That's not what Jesus says. That's not what Paul says. That's not what any of the scriptures says. It's this howdy-do, very mainstream, very soft, weak Christianity that has led to the Christian church in America becoming this very soft, weak thing that it has. And one of the things that we're seeing more and more is young males see that weakness and they reject it. They hate it. They view it as something terrible that needs to be gotten rid of, that needs to be done away with. And so they're lashing out against it. They're pushing back against it. So, like, yes, you're right. The author is right in this. You know, the graying, khaki-clad evangelists who have been making the rounds, we have identified them as soft and weak and people that need to be gotten rid of. They are yesterday's Christians. In fact, they were never yesterday's Christians. They were never really good Christians to begin with. They were a spoon-fed, soft generation that didn't have to fight for anything. And because they didn't have to fight for anything, they never developed the spine and the calluses necessary to fight for things. And so as progressivism has pushed further and further into not just day-to-day life, but into the church, they didn't have the balls to stand up and push back. This current younger generation, like my age and younger, Vance and Wolf's age, 40, 41 and younger, we are seeing that weakness and that softness and realizing that if anybody's going to fight, it's not going to be them. They're not standing up and fighting for us. So now it's time for us to fight. And not only are we seeing that it's time for us to fight, but the ones below us are younger than us that are coming up, the ones that are in their teens, late teens, and early 20s, and on into their late 20s, early 30s. They're already ready to fight because they've basically seen a world that has been turned against them as young, straight, white men. Like, masculinity has been demonized. Everything about being white, male, it's all been demonized. They've seen their entire just existence be turned against them for no more reason than because they fucking exist. And they are ready to fight. So yes, you've got a energized younger base that is seeing this stuff, and now it's our turn. So, I mean, she gets some of this right. In their place, a group of young pastors hope to spearhead a Christian nationalist glow-up as they eagerly await a Christian prince to rule America. These often bearded 30 and 40-somethings have suits that actually fit. They're extremely online, constantly posting on myriad platforms, broadcasting their YouTube shows from man caves, and convening an endless stream of conferences for like-minded followers. Let's call them, as one scholar I spoke with did, the Theobros. Man, I didn't know what it was, but now that I do, maybe I am a Theobro. I love it. I love it. Broadcasting their YouTube shows from man caves. Amazing. For all their youthful modishness, this group is actually more conservative than their old counterparts. Yes, we are done with this middle-of-the-road, middling bullshit. Many Theobros, for example, don't think women belong in the pulpit or the voting booth. Are we wrong? No, we're not wrong. This is correct. We don't think that they do. And there's good scripture for the pulpit, and there's a whole nearly century of voting that has proven that maybe the 19th was a mistake. For some, prison reform would invoke replacing incarceration with public flogging. We used to have, a decent justice system that actually took care of criminals, and then you didn't have repeat offenders. You didn't have overcrowded overcrowded prisons. And now, the reason that we have overcrowded prisons is because it's become a giant government scam to make money. So yes, prison reform with using public flogging sounds like a brilliant idea. Unlike more mainstream Christian nationalists like House Speaker Mike Johnson, who are obsessed with the U.S. Constitution, many Theobros believe that the Constitution is dead and that we should be governed by the Ten Commandments. In American Reformer, their unofficial magazine, hagiographies of Spanish dictator Francisco Franco appear alongside full-throated defenses of countries that execute gay people. On podcasts, the Theobros unpack the perils of multiculturalism, expose Burning Man's wicked agenda, and peel back the nefarious feminist plot of Taylor Swift. In Wolf's The Case for Christian Nationalism, one of their seminal texts, he writes that an ideal Christian nation, heretics would be executed. The rise of the Theobros worries more mainstream religious conservatives. Janet Mefford, a former Christian radio host and journalist who tracks their ascendancy, says her community is alarmed to see an extremist movement gaining traction. I'm not sure what the end game is, other than they want to advance Christian nationalism, she says. But a lot of us find that terrifying. A lot of you find that terrifying because actual Christian nationalism would mean actual Christianity, strong, principled, theological-based Christianity, which would mean those of you who are basically our modern-day Pharisees, you would find yourselves on the wrong side of things and find yourselves being thrown out of the temple. Sorry, maybe that's something that you should look internally and work on for yourselves, not blame us for actually wanting real, strong, principled Christianity. Just a thought. The Theobros strategy is bottom-up. They aim to convert small American towns into Christian enclaves, but it is also top-down. Some are working to position themselves close to the locus of federal power. Vance, a Catholic convert married to a Hindu, would seem an unlikely hero for a movement of devout Protestants who believe in homogeneous America. But over the last few years, his political orbit has increasingly overlapped with that of the Theobros, so much so that to careful observers, his public echoes of their ideas are beginning to sound less like coincidence and more like dog whistles. Everything's a dog whistle with these people. Typically the authors are bitches, so they would probably think that everything that doesn't actually make a noise at all would be a dog whistle. And those dog whistles signal the major themes of this election: hypermasculinity, declining birth rates, ethno-nationalism, and no small measure of carefully curated misogyny. If you want... What the hell? Oh. If you want to know some of the actors who red-pilled Vance, or at least those who flocked to him, you need to meet the Theobros. And this is top clockwise from top left: Douglas Wilson, Joel Webben, Josh Abatoy, Andrew Isker, William Wolfe, and Brian Suave. With no meetings, website, or an explicit statement of faith that unifies their beliefs, the Theobros are not an official organization. They identify with 16th century French theologian John Calvin, who spawned a rigid and deterministic form of Protestantism. Julie Ingersoll, a University of North Florida religion scholar, traces the current movement back to R.J. Rushdoony, an Armenian-American philosopher who popularized the idea of Christian nationalism and homeschooling in the early 1970s. Out of Rushdoony's movement emerged two camps: the charismatic Christians, now known as the New Apostolic Reformation, and the Reformed Protestants, which include the Theobros. They share the goal of creating a Christian nation, says Ingersoll, but differ on a key point of theology. Adherents of the New Apostolic Reformation believe that God is still speaking directly to people through pastors who have declared themselves apostles and prophets. The Theobros, meanwhile, believe that God said all he needed to say in the Bible. Many Theobros are also proponents of postmillennialism, the idea that believers can hasten Jesus' return by fighting against the satanic forces of liberal excess. Theobro Aaron Wren, an eccentric consultant turned Christian pundit, has described our current era as a negative world, where Christians are persecuted for their beliefs. Andrew Isker, another bro, calls it trash world. Are they wrong? Are they wrong? Like all self-respecting millennials, the Theobros have little tolerance for boomers, with the exception of their patriarch, Douglas Wilson, a 71-year-old pastor in Moscow, Idaho. When he was younger, Wilson imagined himself going into the family business, Christian bookstores. But after a stint in the military, he moved to Moscow in 1975 to study philosophy at the University of Idaho, where he became involved with the Jesus People, a kind of mashup of evangelical and hippie culture. He helped found Christ Church, the congregation over which he still presides, and that regularly draws crowds of 1,300. Wilson has since turned the college town into his own Christian kingdom. He helped found New St. Andrews College, the Canon Press Publishing House, and Logos School, one of the nation's first classical Christian schools, where students exclusively study the Western canon. Wilson embraced Calvinism in 1988 and remade his church from the freewheeling Jesus People hub into something far more sober and buttoned up, where women couldn't be church leaders and the only music allowed was hymns and psalms. In the early 1990s, Wilson helped launch the Association of Classical Christian Schools, which had 502 member institutions across the United States as of March 2023. His influence over Moscow has not been without controversy. In 2021, Vice expose, former members of Christ Church alleged that ministers had encouraged them to stay in abusive relationships. That tracks with Wilson's 1990 book Fidelity, How to Be a One-Woman Man, in which he wrote, "The sexual act cannot be made into an egalitarian pleasure party. A man penetrates, conquers, colonizes, plants. A woman receives, surrenders, accepts." For that reason, Wilson wrote, "The dynamic of a dominant man and a submissive woman is an erotic necessity." Wilson called allegations of the church urging women to stay in abusive relationships categorically false. Wilson has also promoted another form of dominance. In the 1996 book, Southern Slavery, As It Was, Wilson and his co-author argued that the master-slave dynamic was a relationship based upon mutual affection and confidence, and that there has never been a multiracial society which has existed with such mutual intimacy and harmony in the history of the world as that of the antebellum South. In a 2020 blog post, Wilson said he now allows that while the benevolent master is not a myth, the idea of the horrific taskmaster is no abolitionist myth either. When I asked Wilson about his controversial statements, he likened himself to a chef who strategically deploys jalapeno peppers. Then some of my enemies online have combed through my writings, have gathered up all the jalapenos and put them on one Ritz cracker. In July, at the National Conservatism Conference in Washington, D.C., Wilson shared the stage with Senators Josh Hawley, Ron Johnson, and Mike Lee, as well as Vance, who auditioned his America is a People bit a week before his star turn at the GOP convention. Wilson agrees with Vance's suggestion that children should be allotted votes managed by their parents. I would like to see elections where households vote, he told me. Men, as the head of households, would actually cast the votes. Though he believes that women's suffrage was a mistake, he would allow a special exception for single mothers. Wilson offered the crowd a few one-liners. I'm a Presbyterian, not a Lesbiterian. But mostly he talked about the persecution of Christians. It used to be that the sexually troubled had to keep their kinks hidden away in the closet, he mused. Now it is the conservative Christian who needs to keep his virtues hidden in the recesses of the closet. After the National Conservatism Conference, Wilson appeared at the Believers Summit, which was headlined by Trump and hosted by the conservative political group Turning Point USA. But it's not just conferences and interviews with the likes of Tucker Carlson where Wilson promotes his ideas. He has a blog, a podcast, and a YouTube channel, thanks mostly to the urging of his children and younger colleagues. One example is that every year since 2018, Wilson has been celebrating what he calls No Quarter November, the month where we say out loud what everyone is thinking. In a 2023 video, which was the brainchild of one of his sons, Wilson sits at a sumptuously appointed Thanksgiving table, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, and addresses the camera. If you think of my blog as a shotgun, he says, this is the month when I saw off all my typical careful qualifications and blast away with a double-barreled shorty. His wife, clad in an apron, brings out a turkey and places it in front of him. And then the tranquil scene is interrupted by a blaring alarm and a glowing red perimeter breach sign. Wilson excuses himself, heads to his garage, and straps on a flamethrower. After using it to light a cigar, he aims the fire at cardboard cutouts of Disney princesses Elsa and Ariel and the logos of Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Netflix. Wilson's willingness to make campy content sets him apart, says Rachel Tabachnik, an extremism researcher who has been studying Christian nationalism for decades. Instead of a crotchety old guy talking about stoning people, he's like super cool, she says. He's witty. In subsequent videos, Wilson tackled women's culpability in rape, the dark side of empathy, and the virtues of something called the patriarchy, that which, according to our soy distant and lisping political theorists, must be smashed. Only they say something like smashed. Something called the patriarchy. I love it. Today's subject, why Taylor Swift is solely responsible for declining birth rates. Yes. See, these are my people. These should be your people too. Wilson has used his platforms to anoint the next generation of ultra-conservative Reformed Christian pastors, all of whom happen to be men. As well they should. Mefford, the conservative Christian journalist, told me that Wolf's The Case for Christian Nationalism got traction in mainstream Christian circles, in part because Doug Wilson endorsed. Another Wilson protege is Joel Webbin, a 38-year-old pastor who hosts a podcast and YouTube show, which he films from a wingback leather chair in a book-lined room. Wibben wasn't always reformed. He was an alumnus of a Bible school run by a new apostolic Reformation affiliated outfit, which he now considers straight up heretical. In his 20s, he broke from the group, moved to Texas, and started his own church. In a video from a few years ago, Webben credited Wilson with emboldening him to say whatever he wanted, like telling a guest that the Founding Fathers weren't responsible for the slave trade because Africans had done the actual kidnapping and enslaving. Is he wrong? Also, the Founding Fathers weren't responsible for the slave trade at all, period. Anyway. For Webben, it was intensely liberating to watch Wilson speak in public without worrying about being canceled. You stay in your little corner, you stay in your little leash because you're like, I don't know what'll happen, Webben says. But when you see some other guys do it and you're like, that's the worst thing that can happen, Vice writes an article about you, Christianity Today editor-in-chief Russell Moore won't invite you to his birthday party anymore. Like, that's it. At a recent conference, his registered dismay over immigrants in his community. It's like full, straight-up Hindu garb at our neighborhood swimming pool that my daughter is asking about, and I'm trying to explain. In August, he remarked on his show that a lot of people are going to be surprised when you start spending eternity worshiping Christ next to Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee and Jonathan Edwards, and you know George Whitefield and Martin Luther King Jr.'s in hell. Webben is so impressed by his own audacity that he maintains an online list of all the controversies in which he's become embroiled. There he explains why he called Christian men living in California stupid. They could just move to a red state. Why he once ordered his wife to stop reading a book on theology. He didn't want her exposed to beliefs that were different from his own. And why he believes in the patriarchal household structure because the Bible says so. No shit. Duh. Yes, makes sense. Webben, who is planning to host a conference in Texas next spring called Christ is King, How to Defeat Trash World, maintains that a return to the Constitution is impossible and that the only viable alternative is the Ten Commandments. Some of Wilson's other acolytes are attempting to create their own versions of Moscow, Idaho. Take Brian Suave, a 33-year-old Christian recording artist, podcaster, and pastor of Refuge Church in Ogden, Utah. Like Webben, Suave wasn't always reformed. Refuge began as a charismatic Christian church. After the lead pastor resigned in a scandal, the then 24-year-old Suave ascended to take his place, immersed himself in Reformed theology, and moved the church in a new direction. Today, he presides over a Moscow-esque ecosystem, a publishing house called New Christendom Press, as well as St. Bernard's Classical Christian Academy, modeled after those in Wilson's network. Can you feel it in the sales? Read St. Bernard's website. The stiff breeze out of Moscow, Idaho? We can. On his 3 podcasts and to his more than 53,000 followers on X, Suave regularly states that women's primary function is to bear children. In July, after Vance's comments about childless cat ladies who are miserable began widely circulating, he posted, "It is desperately sad to think of all the intentionally barren women who will find themselves totally alone in their 50s, realizing their irreversible mistake. They will wish they could trade it all, money, vacations, independence, all of it, for children they can now never have." There's a lot of truth in that. You see it regularly on TikTok, Instagram, X, where women are posting the regret over not having people in their lives because they pursued career and things and bullshit that doesn't actually fill the hole that we all have. But unlike more mainstream conservatives, Suave does not even pretend to champion the idea of a Judeo-Christian nation. He posted in July, "Our political system is heavily influenced by Jews who reject Christ and embrace all manner of evils." An even more well-connected Wilson emulator is Josh Abatoy, executive director of American Reformer and managing partner of a venture capital fund and real estate firm called New Founding. A former fellow of the right-wing think tank, the Claremont Institute, Abatoy reported that he recently participated in a Project 2025 presidential transition strategic planning session hosted by the right-wing think tank, the Heritage Foundation. Bucks County Beacon reporter Jennifer Kahn revealed venture capitalist Chris Buskirk was listed as the editor and publisher. In 2022, Buskirk co-founded the Rockbridge Network, a collection of powerful Trump donors, including Catholic judicial kingmaker Leonard Leo and Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel. Another co-founder of the Rockbridge Network, none other than J.D. Vance. Thiel, Vance's mentor and former employer, is also a major funder of the national conservatism movement. Obsessed with global birth rates, Thiel spent $10 million on his protege's successful 2022 Senate campaign. In July, shortly after Trump had announced Vance as his running mate, Kahn surfaced a tweet by New Founding's network director Josh Clemens, a photo of Vance with several New Founding staffers. The caption read, "Our guy." New Founding lists as a partner the Society for American Civil Renewal, a secretive fraternal order founded by Indiana shampoo baron Charles Haywood, who describes himself as an aspiring Christian warlord. According to founder Nate Fisher, New Founding wants to form the backbone of a renewed American regime, and that its members understand the nature of authority and its legitimate forceful exercise. But its main public-facing project appears to be turning tracts of land in Appalachia into Christian communities. Promotional materials describe a community of unmatched seclusion, where simple country faith protects local culture from rainbow flags and crime. Potential buyers, he advises, should not delay. Who's going to grab the land? Is it going to be good, base people who want to build something inspiring, something authentic to the region's history, or is it going to be Bill Gates and BlackRock and hippies from California? One eager customer is 38-year-old Theobros Andrew Isker, the pastor who interned at Wilson's Church, studied divinity at New St. Andrews, and co-wrote a book on Christian nationalism with Andrew Torba, the openly anti-Semitic CEO of the social media platform Gab. Golly, I've avoided Gab, but if the founder is openly anti-Semitic, maybe I need to hop on there. That Gab might be the place for me. In July, Isker announced on X that he planned to move his family of 7 to lead a church in New Founding community in Tennessee. Life in his native Minnesota, he said, had become untenable because of permissive laws around trans rights and abortion, not to mention how hospitable the state has been to refugees. Minnesota is one of the top destinations for resettling foreign people hostile to our way of life, he said. He's 100% accurate on all of that. Tim Walz's track record speaks for and speaks to all of that. That month, Isker spoke at a Texas conference about the war on white America alongside Paul Gottfried, the mentor and prominent white nationalist Richard Spencer. The mentor of prominent white nationalist Richard Spencer. Richard Spencer, the same white nationalist boogeyman who voted for Joe Biden in 2020. Never mind any of that, though. The conference was hosted by the True Texas Project, a far-right group with ties to Senator Ted Cruz and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Like many Theobros, Isker sees much to like in Vance. In early July, before Trump announced his running mate, Isker referred to him as Senator J.D. Vance, Republican Heritage America. In late July, he posted a video of Vance and told his 29,000 followers, "You need to double down on childless cat lady discourse. Kamala sees happy large families and hates them. She wants them to be destroyed. She wants you to never be able to have this. She is a nasty, bitter harridan who hates all that is good, true, and beautiful. One problem is that there simply are not enough Theobros to populate Christian communities like the one Isker plans to move to." Enter William Wolfe, the founder of the Center for Baptist Leadership, which aims to persuade members of the Southern Baptist Convention that it is the largest of all Protestant denominations in the United States, has fallen prey to the corrupting forces of liberalism. Baptists are only the beginning. Wolfe wants to win over the entire evangelical mainstream, which he and other Theobros refer to as Big Eva. In August, he posted on X, "Once you realize that Big Eva thinks it's a bigger sin to desire to preserve the customs, heritage, values, and cultural homogeneity of your own nation than to kill the unborn in the womb, you can better understand their moral framework." And this is something that I've also talked about in Substack pieces. The Southern Baptist Convention has not fallen yet, but they are not doing a very good job of putting the necessary measures in place to prevent their fall. And they should have learned from the Presbyterian Church and the Methodist Church, in particular, the Presbyterian Church USA and the United Methodist Church, that if you do not take the necessary steps to prevent progressivism from taking over your church, it absolutely will. It does not care about theology. It does not care about biblical values. It only cares about control and progressivism, that is. And the progressive Christian movement has thrown out all of theology. It's thrown out all of the actual substance of the Bible, the substance of Christianity, and now it's replaced it with the world and trying to just be a good person. Just love everybody. Jesus loves you no matter what. You don't need to change your ways or do anything. No need to repent or anything like that. Just know that Jesus loves you and be a good person in your own mind and in your own heart. And as long as you can do that, you're fine. Yeah, that is mainstream Christianity. That's why the Theobros movement needs to gain traction. It needs to grow. It needs to stamp that awful shit out. Wolf served in the Trump administration, both as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense and as Director of House Affairs at the Department of the State. He's also an alumnus of Heritage Action, the sister organization of the Heritage Foundation, the arch-conservative think tank behind Project 2025, whose chief architect, Russell Vought, posted on X that he was proud to work with William E. Wolf on scoping out a sound Christian nationalism. A few months later, the Bucks County Beacon uncovered a lengthy online manifesto on the goals of Christian nationalists. The document, which listed Wolf and Joel Webben as contributing editors and Oklahoma Senator Dusty Devers as a co-author, called for civil magistrates to usher in the establishment of the Ten Commandments as the foundational law of the nation. The manifesto doesn't specify exactly how Christian nationalists should achieve these goals. As Tabanek, the extremism researcher, interprets it, the Theobros are imagining a utopia where they're going to be free to be entrepreneurs in all different senses, including the tech world that they're mixing with so freely. The key, she said, is that authoritarianism is required to have the utopian vision. Authoritarianism is required for the Theobros to just put themselves in positions to be leaders in their communities and to create social media content. That's authoritarian. If you haven't noticed, every single researcher and author and like person outside of the Theobros, the chick who's writing this article has mentioned as reference pieces are all women. It's exclusively women. I don't even. It's insane. The manifesto. Last year, the extremism watchdog group Right Wing Watch posted a video of Wolf quoting a scripture passage. Oh my gosh. There are times when even the God of peace proclaims by his providence to arms, he says. If we have ever lived in a point of time in American history since then that we could argue that now is the time to arms again, I think we're getting close. William Wolf's Christian Nationalism Manifesto made the rounds on social media, but in mainstream conservative outlets, it was Stephen Wolf who brought Theobro ideas to the wider world. In his book, which was praised by editors at the Federalist and the American Conservative, Wolf paints America as a genocracy whose government and culture have been feminized by unhappy women leaders. Sounds familiar? It does sound familiar because that's exactly what's kind of happened. He has stated on X that women should not have a right to vote and that interethnic marriage can be sinful. Wolf grew up in Napa, California, and his father was an admirer of the right-wing pundit and erstwhile GOP presidential candidate Pat Buchanan. More Pat Buchananism. That's what we need. We need a resurgence of people who were admirers of Pat Buchanan. If you don't know anything about Pat Buchanan's positions, his stances on things, look into it. Like, Pat Buchanan Christian nationalism is exactly what we need right now. After attending West Point and serving in the Army, Wolf earned advanced degrees before leaving academia to do the Wendell Berry thing in North Carolina with his wife and 4 kids. Over the summer, Wolf, 41, agreed to speak with me on the condition that I refer to him as Dr. Wolf and called him an expert on Christian nationalism. The Dr. Wolf I spoke with was a more muted version of the firebrand I'd watched online. He says his ideal version of America would be led by a Caesar figure. We've talked about Caesar figure on the show before. Gay marriage would be strictly prohibited. Women would not be allowed to vote. Instead, men would vote for their households. When I brought up the bit from his book about heretics being killed, he grew annoyed. I do think it's permissible in principle for a state to suppress theological heresy, but that doesn't mean that it's prudent or proper, suitable in every circumstance or every tradition or way of life. The founding fathers, he added, had encouraged religious liberty, so killing heretics would not be appropriate in the United States that we inhabit. We turn to remarks he had made at a recent conference convened by Brian Suave. I think we need to reflect on this idea of Judeo-Christianity, or Judeo-Christian worldview, or Judeo-Christian whatever, and really eradicate that from our thinking. Because if we say that America is a Judeo-Christian country, then it can't be a Christian country, okay? What role, I asked him, would Jews play? After a deep sigh, he told me that they would be allowed to exercise their religion freely. Yeah, somewhere the fuck else. Anyway, that's why we gave them their own country, right? We spoke a week before Vance's RNC speech, and Wolf's remarks helped me understand that what the Theobros heard in Vance's phrase about America as a people. The founders, Wolf noted, intended for their country to be Anglo-Protestant with an American inflection. America, he continued, is a place of settlement and rootedness, but it's an open ethnicity in which people can become one of us, which is to say that, like some others, Wolf is not necessarily opposed to the idea of non-white people in America, as long as they agree to assimilate to the Anglo-Protestant dominant culture. In this telling, America is not a pluralist society at all, but rather one in which there exists an uneasy truce between Christians and those who they reluctantly tolerate. That's kind of the point of immigration, as to integrate yourself into the society. That was kind of the point of immigration for a long time, and the way the immigration process worked was that you came in and now you learn English. You have to take a test. You have to prove that you actually know where you live. You have to abide by the laws of the place. Now, what they call immigration is just bringing people in, dumping them, and allowing them to set up their own fucking third world countries in small towns all across the Midwest. That's not immigration. That's a fucking takeover. That's a hostile takeover. As immigration, as the Theobros talk about it, that's the way it was intended. That's the way it should be done. Toward the end of our conversation, I asked Wolf what motivated him. I want Christians to be more assertive and to recognize the Christian heritage of the American way of life and to seek to restore that, he said. This is a Christian country, and we've got to work to restore it to what it once was. In his keynote address at Suave's conference titled Why Multicultural Pluralism Fails and What to Build Instead, Wolf called the concept of America as a melting pot an early 20th century idea cooked up by a Jew in New York who despised the confident Anglo-Protestant establishment. WASPs were the distinct ethnicity of America, he insists, and America should only welcome those who aspire to assimilate. As he put it, this is our homeland, and we welcome you on the condition of conformity. Or in the words of J.D. Vance, America is a group of people. That took longer than I had kind of expected it to, so I think I'll stop with that one today. But actually, I do have another article that ties in well with the. So the other article I was going to do today is we all have a lot to lose if Trump wins. This is from Vanity Fair, and it's talking about journalism and how journalists are so terribly positioned to like be the ultimate losers in the event of Trump winning the next election. I actually have a really neat article that kind of goes with some of what I was talking about here, but also ties in well with that one. A new study finds teens lack trust in media as online conspiracies flourish. So I think I'll combine those two instead, since this one did go a little bit longer. But the Theobros stuff, I see this is all positive. Like, we need to grow the Theobro movement, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. Everything that she describes in this article, like, that's what we need to be pushing for. We need more people to be vocal, to understand that our way of life, our religion, our principles, everything that we hold dear and holy, that we hold as good and right, has been attacked to the point that we have been hiding in holes for decades now, at least 20 years, possibly 40. It's time to stand up and take back what is ours, and do it the right way, by creating communities, by building and growing these communities, by preaching the gospel, by being theologically true, by doing the things that require some guts, but also bring the most glory. So get out there and start building shit. Do good things. Do awesome shit. What are the odds that we succeed? It doesn't matter. It's not whether or not we succeed. It's that we need to, that we have to, that saving our future, my son and daughter and my grandchildren, saving this country for them means we have to grow a pair of balls and go be strong Christians. And that means taking up the Theobro mantle and riding with it. So let's do this. Let's prove Mother Jones right. Let's prove that extremism was the correct classification for the Theobro movement. It is an extreme thing, but it's a necessary thing to get this country back on the right track. That'll do it for today. I will actually, I think I'll do the other two articles tomorrow, just so I've got some content, because I'm not sure what next week is going to look like. Could be busy. So anyway, tune in tomorrow for what's going on in the mainstream media, in particular with the free press. I'll see you then. Later.